Hello and welcome to Landscape Photography World, the podcast for everyone passionate about landscape photography. I'm Grant Swinburne and I'll be your host on the show, talking to landscape photographers about their motivations, likes and dislikes. This podcast is sponsored by SyncBack Pro, the professional photographer's tool to keep your images safe. How safe are your photographs? Or to put it this way, how would you feel if you permanently lost some or even all of them? The fact is, there are very real risks in storing your digital images on a hard drive, even if they're backed up to an external device. There's ransomware, hardware failure, file corruption, virus infection, and even accidental deletion or destruction. SyncBack Pro makes this problem go away permanently. SyncBack Pro is the professional photographer's tool to back up photographs, images, documents, and data files. Once set up, it keeps your files safe, quietly and reliably in the background. So if problems occur or disaster strikes, you'll have nothing to worry about. Your photographs will be safe. Which is why it's also the backup solution that I use myself for my own photographs. Take advantage of an exclusive 25% discount today by going to www.backup.sg. The software will never expire, meaning your photographs are safe forever. That's www.backup.sg. Give your photographs the protection they deserve. And now, on with the show. As a lover of the colour yellow, a connoisseur of coffee, an adventurer on road trips, and a devoted companion to her 11-year-old Whippet, Ollie, Sarah Lyndsay finds joy in life's simple pleasures. Yet photography is her true passion, a dream come true. With over 12 years of professional experience, photography has profoundly transformed her life. She dedicated every spare moment to mastering the art, pursuing formal education in professional photography, and earning her diploma. It has been a rewarding journey guiding her into landscape and self-portrait photography, as well as the realm of NFT art. Known for her signature yellow dress, she weaves stories that evoke profound emotions and foster deep connections with viewers. Through photo tours and workshops, she guides and educates others, helping them unlock their creative potential. In the realm of fine art, she continually seeks personal growth on this extraordinary journey. We discuss how the yellow dress came about, her travels around the world in pursuit of amazing landscapes, the importance of purpose, communication, and storytelling in her photography, along with a lot more. I hope you enjoy the show. G'day, Sarah. Welcome to Landscape Photography World. How's your day going?
It's going pretty good. It's still a little bit early, so just starting the day, but it is beautiful and sunny here. I'm currently in London, so enjoying all the rainy and sunny weather that comes throughout the day.
Yeah, the four seasons you get in one day in London.
Yeah, but it's beautiful because it's spring right now, so all the flowers are out, so it's just gorgeous.
Nice. It's a little bit cooler here. We're heading into autumn. Plenty of clear skies at the moment, and it's getting what we call cold.
Yeah. Because you're in Australia.
Degrees. Yeah, I'm in Australia.
Yeah. I've spent a lot of time. Yeah, it's not cold for me because I'm from Canada, but I spent a lot of time in Australia, so I love it there.
Fantastic. We might talk about that a little bit later. Why don't you tell people who you are, people that may not have come across your YouTube channel or any of your work online? It would surprise me if there hasn't been some exposure to it.
I'm sure there's lots of people that don't know.
Tell them who you are and why you do what you do.
I am Sarah Lyndsay. I am a Canadian photographer. I live in a very beautiful place called Banff, which I'm sure most of the world knows. It's quite well known in the Canadian Rockies. And I have been a landscape photographer for about 13 years now. But I also do self-portrait photography that came a little bit later on in the journey. And it's really heavily focused around the yellow dress that I wear quite a bit in all of my self-portraits. So the yellow dress has basically become the brand and the face of everything that I do. And now I do both of them actually at the same time, landscape photography and the self-portrait photography. I've basically have blended the two together and created the yellow dress saga.
Fantastic. So take us back to the beginning. Where did it start for you? How did landscape photography become a thing for Sarah?
I was quite young when I first discovered photography, maybe 22 or 23, those early years of the 20s. And it actually started with Photoshop. It didn't start with photography. I was on a date with a fella who is a photographer, and he brought me back to his house because he wanted to show me like what he does. At the time, he would take images and then he would bring them into Photoshop and he was really into death metal. So he would make yeah, it was cool. He was a really cool guy. He loved making album covers for bands. So that was like, looking back now, I can see that was his creative, mindful space. So I just loved watching he showed me how he does everything, and I had never seen Photoshop before. So I just love the process of how he would create like layers and textures and just create something in that program. So I asked him, so I wanted to do that, not album covers, but I just wanted to play in Photoshop. I asked him to give me the program. So he illegally downloaded the program for me.
It's all right. We won't tell Adobe.
Yeah. And it was so long ago. I don't even remember how you got Photoshop back in the day, but so he put the program on my computer for me. And then I was like, okay, what do I do? I just took his lead by working on images. So I was like, all right, I need to go out and take some photos and put these into Photoshop. So I found my parents had the little really tiny old point and shoot at the time. So I used that point and shoot for so long. So I grabbed that and I just went out and started taking photos of usually like flowers and bees and jewelry. I would photograph jewelry because I really loved the bokeh effect. And where I would get like the inspiration from to start that, because the fella also showed me a site that was full of art and photography. I'm not sure if many people will remember this, but it's called Deviant Art.
I used to be a Deviant.
Yeah, Deviant Art. That's like just the original.
I think my account's still live. It hasn't posted to it.
Mine is too. It reminds me of MySpace, but for artists. And anyways, I would always see the images. Like there would be people that would just take photographs of like hedgehogs in like little teacups. It was so cute. Sure. And then that was it for me. My mind just exploded into creativity. But for a long time, I was photographing like everything that I would read in magazines or online. I was like, I want to try that. I want to try that. So I did everything, people, landscapes, again, jewelry, just creating little things and then putting it together in Photoshop. So I had quite a vast portfolio in the first year, but I never shared it with anyone. Never, ever. I didn't show people what I was doing. I just loved creating. And then finally, I posted a few photos on Facebook because Facebook was raging back in the day. Yep. So I posted a few photos there, and it's usually your family members that will see it. And then they just started encouraging me. And I remember I was reading a magazine. My parents would get me a couple of photography magazines here and there. And I was reading this one, and I saw this picture of Lake Louise, which is in Canada, very close to where I live now. But back then I had never been into the Canadian Rockies, and I just fell in love. And that photo pretty much started my landscape photography journey. I knew I was going to go to that location and take a very similar photo, and that was it. Then I started getting into star trails and wanting to experiment with just cool little techniques, and I have not stopped since.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So when I talk to a lot of photographers, they tend to say they liked hiking, and so they were recording what they were seeing. And there's, for me, that sort of split between being a record or recording type photographer versus an artistic photographer. Sounds like that was flipped around a little bit for you. It was more the art that came first, and then the photography flowed on from there.
Yes. So I do hike now, obviously where I live, it's just prime hiking world. But at that time when I started photography, actually I used to be such a different person, which we will get into with the yellow dress now, but I actually was really overweight. So I was around about 250 pounds, which in the kilo world, I'm probably wrong on this, but I think it's about 95 kilos. And
it'd probably be close.
Yeah. So because I started photography, especially landscape photography, that meant I had to get out and start exercising and getting to the places I wanted to photograph. So it actually changed my whole lifestyle. And I lost a bunch of weight with that because I started being invested in the landscapes.
Yeah. Cool. What's your approach to photography as it relates to your art, what is obviously your style has developed and changed from where you started 12 or 13 years ago to where you are now. How has that started to take form for you in terms of how it's a creative expression as opposed to, as I said, just recording stuff?
So I definitely consider myself in the genre of fine art, and lots of people will have a definition of what fine art is, but I
Who knows
Googled
what
it.
it really is?
I know. I Googled it one day and then I liked the definition and I was like, yeah, that sounds like me. What I like read about it is fine art is like taking an idea and then executing it. Yeah. Like you're not just going out in the landscape, and this is why the self-portraits are so important. But yeah, I try to get involved with like storytelling and just, yeah, creating that all around idea. So I consider myself a would I call myself a fine artist? No, that doesn't make sense. I'm in fine art. I'm a fine art photographer. But I do believe when I started photography, it was based around creativity and art. I just didn't know it back then because I was so young.
Sure.
I loved looking at conceptual work, and especially deviant art was a huge influencing factor on that. Like I loved when people would photograph self-portraits and they were based on an idea, like a conceptual idea. And I loved like levitating images. And I have this huge portfolio of the images like that, but I don't do it anymore, but because I've evolved. But yeah, a fine art photographer.
Sounds good. So you classify yourself as a photographer rather than an artist, or an artist rather than a photographer?
Right now,
well, you don't think it matters.
I don't think it really matters. Yeah, I don't really think it matters. It honestly depends who I'm talking to. Some people will relate more to a photographer and some people will relate more to an artist. But looking down the road and down the future, I believe I'm an artist.
Cool. So talk us through how the yellow dress concept evolved and how that got started. How old, I've got to ask, how old is the yellow dress and how many miles do you think it's done?
The yellow dress is still a baby, but also it's not. Maybe it's more like the toddler. It's like toddler age. So the yellow dress has a huge backstory to it. And I'm like, throughout my photography career journey, I've been known as a landscape photographer. So I've built up like this big portfolio and just my skill and became like a master in that. So I consider the landscape photography like the bread to what the self-portraits are, and the self-portraits are the meat. But it actually started in 2019. And believe it or not, before the yellow dress, I did every color of dress you could think of. Like I started, when I started in 2019, my idea was to photograph different colors based on how they matched the landscape. I really love doing that, like white fits here or blue fits here. So it started that way for a couple of years. And then finally, I got the yellow dress. I should back up and say this bit as well. I used to be like a wedding photographer, maternity photographer. I did all of those like portrait services. And with maternity and like weddings, you're often working with big, beautiful flowing gowns. So I would actually just use the client dresses that I had accumulated, and then I would start photographing myself in them. I had this one day. I used to live along a lake in Canada, and I was like a sunset and sunrise warrior. I was always going out and creating landscapes. And this one night, I went out to create for sunset, just a typical landscape, but I was feeling bored of it. So I was like, I wonder what it would look like if I put a person in the lake and did like a long exposure. Yeah. And I just thought of it so quickly that I didn't have time or even the energy to gather up a model and get her out there and do that. So I was like, why don't I just use myself? I can fit into these dresses, and I have really long dark hair, so I knew that it would look really good. So I went out one evening, it was quite stormy, and I walked in the lake and I took my very first self-portrait, which was actually a white dress. And then again, started photographing all the multicolored dresses. But I ended up getting a yellow dress. I didn't purposely do this. I didn't think I would use it, but I got a yellow dress because it was actually quite trendy at the time for clients. Yep. So I was like, okay, I'll add yellow into the fleet. And then I just noticed I was gravitating to it more and more for myself. And I noticed the response from like my audience was like, oh, you really sure like yellow? You sure are using yellow. But there's more to this story because it actually follows my life journey as well, and things that had happened in my life. And I believe that the yellow dress was very serendipitous. It just was meant to come to me at that time, because when I started my self-portrait journey in 2019, that's when, right before COVID, so obviously loss of work, but I also went through like a divorce and pretty much lost my whole life that I had built up with my husband, and based around actually a lot of my mistakes that I did. So the person that I was quite different before to now, of course, I've done a lot of changing. So the yellow dress actually represents like my personal growth journey, my self-awareness, and becoming a different person. And yellow is so happy and positive and just such a bright color. And like what it represents is basically what I want to become. I'm a big believer, if you act like sunshine, you will feel like sunshine.
Absolutely.
And that's the yellow dress to me. And I like there's a lot more to the story of like how I grew up as well. And I didn't really grow up with a very healthy home. So there's a lot of abuse that obviously influenced my decisions as an adult and where I made all my mistakes. So the yellow dress really is all about discovery and self-awareness and changing.
Yeah, fantastic. Are you using that as a means or a trigger for some of your creative expression in terms of how you've developed that self-portrait of a person in the landscape? And I know from many of your images, you can be quite small, showing the scale of the grander landscapes, but sometimes it's a little bit more intimate where you're focusing on a smaller scene.
Yeah.
I guess, how has it developed in terms of using that element creatively?
So for me, like there still is, so I feel like it's almost I'm creating in two worlds. There's this part of me that I love the skill that I've built up, and I just love the technical aspect of landscape photography and going out and creating and using everything that I've learned in my knowledge and then creating some great work. And then with the self-portraits, it's actually now taught me more how to story tell. So I still, like when I go out and set up a scene and put myself in there, like I'm using my brain that is, this will look good. I know this will look good. And it started off with being like really small in the landscape scene, but now because I do have portrait skill like built up from before, now I'm starting to get more intimate on placing myself in the scene, more close up. So maybe you can see some expression, or like posing is really challenging. So I'm actually still learning a lot about posing. But like how my self-portraits are influenced is it's heavily based around my landscape photography skill.
Cool. In terms of the process of experimentation, how long has it taken for you to not necessarily hone? Obviously, the landscape and the portrait skill sets have fed into where you've got to, but how much has it taken in terms of experimentation to get the shot? Because failure is something that everyone, particularly landscape photographers, know a lot about. And the number of shots that I've just fluffed because I've missed a setting, or I've left the settings on from an astro shoot in a dawn shoot, so I'm shooting at ISO 7,000 or whatever.
I still do that. I do that all the time. I will always make mistakes. I think I don't think that part ever ends. So I consider I'm 13 years in deep of just still building up skill. And I know the next 13 years, I'm only going to get better and better. I don't believe that part ever stops. You obviously reach a certain level of skill where your work becomes really noticeable and recognizable, but it will continue to evolve and change. And it'll also be interesting to see how like the yellow dress evolves and changes as well.
In terms of the concepts, are you planning them days, months, weeks ahead, or is it something that's a little bit more spontaneous? Because obviously those set pieces have to be planned. You've got to work out where you're going to put the camera and the tripod. You've got to work out where you're going to position yourself in the shot. So it's not like you can just turn up on the day or the night and go, all right, tripod here, I'm going to stand there, bang, off we go.
It's actually a bit of both. And the spontaneous part is actually winning. So a lot of the best work, a lot of like my best works has been created just showing up somewhere, not knowing what I'm doing, what the heck I'm photographing, what the weather conditions are. And it's really interesting how that happens, actually. That's the part I love the most, is when I don't think I'm going to get something and then I create something that is like my best work. But there still is there. I still do a lot of planning and like visioning, because I'm also into storytelling. So with storytelling, you have to think about it and like thinking in a conceptual way. So there's an element of planning, but there is also this big portion of me. And I think that's just because of the person I am. I'm incredibly impulsive, very spontaneous. People can ask me, hey, do you want to come to Italy next week? And I'll be like, yep, book a plane ticket and go. And then my mind will start spinning and I'll be like, okay, what am I going to create there? And then I start visioning things. I start researching like what other people have done and getting like an idea of what I'm going to do. But most of my work has been on the fly and created just really unexpectedly. Those are always my favorite.
Mm-hmm. What does success look like for you in terms of either an image or a body of work?
Oh, as long as I feel really good about it and like my spirits are high after, and I'm feeling that, but like that adrenaline and that buzz, no matter how the audience responds to it, as long as I'm feeling good about it, I feel successful. And I especially feel successful if I've been like down and feeling like I'm in a creative slump, and then I go out and create something that I think is great. That's success to me.
Fantastic. Yeah. You mentioned storytelling and the desire to communicate. How much of your success do you attribute to that ability to communicate and tell a story in your work?
I would say it's been now about like 2 years, well, a year and a half to 2 years of the yellow dress saga. And that has been the most successful that I have been. Not exactly financially successful, but becoming more globally known successful, because I'm a big believer in purpose. And a lot like photography is hard. Photography is hard to make it for a living out of it. It's hard to grow a following. It's hard to just grow it in general. And because of my like self-development journey and like a lot of therapy and stuff, I started learning about purpose and passion. And again, the yellow dress just ties in so much to purpose for me, that I believe I'm supposed to be creating with the yellow dress so that I can share my story with the world. It's become like the outlet of connecting with people, especially on an emotional level.
Yeah. I guess harking back to the landscape work rather than focusing just on the yellow dress, because your portfolio is much wider than that, obviously.
Yes, my purple is huge.
How about your success in communicating stories in those landscapes?
With just the landscape photography. So as a business, like I teach landscape photography and I would work with brands and all of that stuff. It's really hard to connect with people via landscape photography. I find that very challenging. But with the storytelling with landscape photography, what I've been learning is it's really interesting. You don't show up to the scene to photograph the scene. Like you make the image about the subject that you're photographing in the landscape. So as long as you're thinking in that way, you can communicate like a story behind the landscape. Let's say it's a big, massive mountain and it's stormy and moody. Like focus on telling the story about that mountain in the mood. And with landscape photography, I think it's harder to tell stories than if you put a person in the scene. Taking like multiple images of that scene and tying them all together and sharing them all together at once really helps tell the story of that scene. So if it's stormy when you show up to a landscape, focus on conveying in the images that it's stormy, and you will tell a little bit of a story through it.
Yeah. Okay. In terms of the environment being a big part of your work, how much do you push any kind of environmental advocacy with your work, and whether that's the yellow dress or the pure landscape work? Do you think about things in those terms? The sense I get from your work is that it's very much grounded in the place, and whether that's, as you said, it could be Italy, it could be Scotland, it could be Canada, it could be Australia, but there's very much a grounding in that environment, and you very much get the feeling of being in that environment. Go on.
Sorry. I don't really focus on like at all really talking about the environment. I just never think of it because I'm trying to share a different message through my work. I'm not, of course, I respect the environment and I know that I have influence and that I could definitely be sharing to people, hey, obviously leave no trace, take care of this. But I rarely talk about it. And that's because I'm focused on a completely different message. I'm not focused on the environment when I'm out there. But I do recognize like my responsibility and my influence. Again, there will be photographers that they're very gentle about it because I photograph a lot of wildflowers and some of them will just gently remind me if you're going to there's places where you can go in the wildflowers. There's obviously places that you can't. And they will point it out, be like, maybe you should explain how you've been in this scene. A good example of this is every year I go and photograph a tulip festival, but I missed it this year because I was traveling too much. But I always go and photograph a tulip festival, which is controlled and put on, you pay for it. And they always have areas, they're pretty relaxed about their tulip fields. They have fields where you can go and pick flowers, and they have ones where you can go and stand in the rows and take pictures of yourself. And I had one photographer, he was came down hard on me and was like, you should know better considering your influence. But I also felt you should know better because this is allowed. Do your research and look at the tulip.
Trampling over some farmers' fields.
I'm not. And go and look at, I'm tagging the tulip festival in all of my images. And if you go and look at their account, they're sharing tons of images with people in the fields. They built those fields for things like that. And I don't believe people actually realize that the tulips that come up, like the colorful flowers that come up, that's for display. The money-making portion and the environmental portion is actually the bulbs underneath the ground. Yep. So at the end of every season, a tractor will come over the tulips and cut off all their heads. Yeah, it's such a special thing, the tulip festivals, and it draws families and people come in there and take photos. It's beautiful. So I will stand up for things like that if someone is coming down on me for being in the flowers.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I know over here we have canola season, and which is where you get those beautiful carpets of yellow and green across farmers' fields. And I do know some photographers that are very respectful of those fields because they're a financial crop for the fella or the family that's growing them or the company that's growing them.
Yeah, absolutely. I haven't been in a canola field yet. I definitely want to, but I do know because I live in an area where we have the same thing, the canola fields and the big farms, and I drive past them all the time, and I have photographed them before. But if I was going to go stand in it, at the edge of the fields, it's always a really sparse kind of, the dead of it.
For me, that's always acceptable.
That's the place to stand.
Also, if there's a barbed wire fence in front of me, I'm not climbing over it because I don't rip clothing. But
me either.
It's there for a reason. Use a longer lens.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, use a longer lens. I shouldn't say I haven't been in a canola field. I have, but it's always at the edge of it on the side of the road where it's just the little fingers that trickle off. Yeah. But I also know because I grew up near farm world, I know that that's their crops. I've had farmers drive by me before when I've been out photographing their fields. Not once have they ever come out and been like, "What are you doing?" If I get permit, like if I have asked before if they stop and I'm like, "Oh, I love your field and can I photograph it?" "Oh yeah, of course. That's so good." But I would never go like way deep into a field because it's also mucky. I don't want to get dirty. I don't feel like with fields, and because the hordes of people will always gravitate to what's popular, and being out in the middle of the nowhere in a farmer's field just doesn't do it for a lot of people.
Yeah. No,
that's the great thing about it is we still have that special pocket to us to photograph, which is really quiet still.
Yeah. It amazes me. I don't know if you've noticed it in Scotland and the UK, the right-of-way laws that are there, where literally I went on a hike in the Lake District a year or so ago, and to get to this particular waterfall, you literally had to walk through this farmer's yard, not his fields. There was a lane up to the yard, and then he's got his house and he's got his barns and he's got his tractors and whatever, and he's chickens running around, and you're walking through, and all of these hikers are just walking through that place. And it's kind of, I don't know, over here that you don't have the same laws, so it just feels really weird and a little bit trespassy, but
I think it's called, because it's the same in Scotland. I learned that in Scotland when I was over there. It's called the right to roam. You're allowed to, like, I didn't know that. I still didn't do it. And I would feel guilty. I don't know, walking by someone's house at sunset. Hi, I'm going out to photograph your yard. But it's cool that you can do that. But I don't feel comfortable doing that.
Yeah, I don't feel comfortable. I don't mind doing that where there's definitely a path. And if the path, in this case, all of the guides that I read said, this is where you go and the path is through there. And the farmer just nodded and waved, and that was it. It was cool by him. If it's cool by the farmer, I'm okay with it.
When I was recently in Scotland, we did have this one moment where I felt like we shouldn't have been in the spot. And it was that we just got stuck in our camper van, and it was because we were on grass that was just way too soft. And for me, I was not driving. I did not make this decision. I knew we were going to get stuck. Mistakes are mistakes. It happened. But I had a moment based on like where I'm in Canada, we're very pro protect the environment, and it's really controlled. I felt guilty that we were trying to put the camper van on that patch of grass. I won't fully use the right to roam in these countries. I will still respect it.
Fair enough. I guess one of the things I'm interested in is how you challenge yourself to come up with new ideas and think outside the square and experiment. What techniques do you use to do that experimentation?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I never have a problem with this. This is never something that like I've ever struggled. Like I definitely get in creative funks.
Everybody
but I
does.
like, I push myself after, because there's always a creative surge after a creative funk. So I always push myself, but I draw a lot of inspiration. Like I look online, obviously, and see things, and I'm like, oh, that's beautiful. I'm going to go out and try that or learn this technique. But I draw the most inspiration from like how I'm feeling in my heart, like at the time of my life. Actually, that heavily influences my work. And it seems to be, which is annoying, and I thought about this the other day, like if I have a lot of turmoil going on in my life, or like a season where it's just not very good, I actually create my best work. And I'm like, okay, so to be a successful artist, I'm going to have to go through a lot of crap. Lovely. Because that's usually when I create the best, is when I'm really sad or emotional.
I was talking to TJ Thorne recently, and he was saying almost exactly the same thing, is that you don't get your best work by doing something that you're comfortable with.
Yeah, exactly.
It becomes automatic. You don't push, you're not pushing yourself. So if you're not actually getting outside your comfort zone, how are you ever going to succeed and progress?
Exactly. And I'm not a person, I used to have a problem with being in my comfort zone, but not anymore, because my life was flipped upside down. So I changed. So every aspect of my life is like living outside of my comfort zone. Like right now, I'm just traveling Europe and just going with the flow and seeing what happens and creating on the fly. So I'm a big believer in getting out of your comfort zone and saying yes to things.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I want to move on to the commercial, I guess, the bits that enable you to go and do things like that. So where did the commercial side of photography start for you? Was it with the portraits and wedding photography, and then you've just expanded that into full-time landscape?
Yes. So it started, I've always been a landscape photographer. So there's always been an element of that I've been like paid for. I never understood business for a really long time. So that took a while to get a grasp on it. But financially and like actually making a dent in my wallet, or like filling it up with money from photography, started with weddings, families, portraits, and all that. Sure. And then that was lost in 2020. So obviously when I was ready to let it go as well. But at that point in time, and that's when the yellow dress was just taking off, I had obviously learned a lot and started to gain financially. And in terms of the landscape photography, where I make an income off of that is like I work with brands, and of course there's an element of influencing with my work. A lot of people think I am a full-on influencer, the typical Instagram. I'm not really, actually. Like I do some influencing, but not at the scale that people think that I do. And YouTube is obviously one of those commercial ones, and NFT art, because that's quite new. That became because I got into it last year. So that became actually a big source of the income, but it's all down right now. So it's
Yeah.
not a good year. Last year was really great in terms of stuff like that. Oh, I also lead tours. That's a big one as well. And I partner with other photographers and we do about 4 to 5 tours a year. So that's landscape photography though. But I do bring the yellow dress into it as well. And I let the clients photograph the yellow dress.
How do you handle being everything in an organization? So in a company, you've got a CEO, you've got a marketing director, you've got people under them that do things, you've got a finance and accounting team, usually. You've got a bunch of people that do operations and the website and all of those sorts of things. And maybe
I find it all really hard.
Yeah. So how does that fit into the business?
It's also all of those things. It's such a learning process, I think. And I definitely have gotten the grasp of it in the last year and this year. I did outsource at one point for an assistant more because the part that I find is the most challenging is actually, and because it's important to keep up with your socials, I find the social media part to be the most challenging. You just always have to constantly be on. And so I did hire someone, an assistant, to help me with that. But I take breaks here and there with using her because like she's just not there yet. Like she's brand new to what she's doing. So I need more of a skill within that. Yep. So I take it all on, but I'm a big believer that especially in business, like your first few years, you sacrifice a lot of stuff. If you want to go great lengths, and I have some major goals, you put in hard. It's very similar to any kind of job that you choose. There's an element of sacrifice to become a master at it.
Yep.
Same with if you have kids, you sacrifice a lot of your life to go to those kids. Absolutely. And in my case, I sacrifice having a family and having kids and having a partner to build what I'm building.
Okay. Do you find that challenge of keeping things going overwhelming at times? And if you do, how do you push through?
Yes, I find it very overwhelming because I also want to live my life.
Of course, everyone
like that. Yeah.
You want to actually enjoy the experience.
Yeah, exactly. I like right now, because since I'm traveling so much, there's definitely a portion that I'm giving away of my business to being able to get out and explore. But I also can work on the road. So it's actually pretty handy. I'm trying to create a work life that fits around my lifestyle. And I'm definitely getting there. But I think that the thing that I sacrifice the most to keep this going and where I get overwhelmed is I'm 36 years old and I don't have a partner. I'm alone. I don't have kids. I don't have a home. I have a home base. I have a little tiny suite, but I don't have a house. I don't own any of those, what we could consider adult things. And probably my dating life suffers the most, I would think.
Fair enough. I'm not going to delve into that.
No.
You mentioned the goals that you've got. How important is it both for your creativity, but also for the business? How important is it to have those goals and be able to not necessarily just tick them off, but get to them, then work out, okay, what's the next goal?
I think the goals are really important, like what I've just learned, and this would be in any business. If you don't have a vision for yourself and you don't have a plan for yourself, plans include goals, you'll probably lose steam and you'll lose interest in it and you'll fall off the wagon. So I think really keeping your vision on those goals, but also being adaptable is really important to the success of your business.
Definitely.
And creativity as well. You need to know that you need to get better at what you're doing.
Yeah, so I even find it down to individual images. I need to have an idea in my mind what kind of image I'm trying to convey. And that starts in the field. And sometimes if it's an astro image, for example, it might even start with the planning using photo pills and Google Maps and all the other tools to work out, okay, that's where I need to stand and I can work a composition from there.
Yes. They say with a YouTube, because YouTube's an interesting beast all on its own.
I'm learning that.
Yeah, I remember someone told me, because like I was encouraged to get on YouTube and by like really great photographers. Nigel Danson was the one who like approached me and just said, you should be on YouTube. You would really fit it. And then I remember I think I was talking to possibly Adam Gibbs a little bit about starting up YouTube. And he said, just focus on 100 videos and improve something with each video. So that was really great advice. And it makes you think like long-term as well.
Yeah.
Like it's just not going to happen right away. So that's been helpful with goals.
Yeah, I think with anything, nothing comes without effort and nothing comes without the steps. Nobody gets to 100,000 YouTube followers or whatever in one day unless they have some incredibly viral piece of content.
Video. Yeah, you got to have if you can.
They're so rare, and the amount of content, the amount of stuff that's being produced these days, it's almost impossible to get seen unless you actually just build and build, regardless of which social media you're using. Yeah.
Reverse engineering is very important with YouTube. So if you pick a niche or whatever you are into, as landscape photographers, research that niche and what other people are doing and do reverse engineering on it and see what worked. So there's an element of give and take when you're building something. Like of course, I don't want to look at trendy titles of what people are putting on their videos, but I also know you need to.
Yeah, you can't get unfortunately with YouTube, you can't get away without having some kind of clickbait title or thumbnail there that says, hey, look at me.
I'm learning what I've been learning with YouTube is like what performs the best in terms of what the thumbnail looks like is having a person and a camera in it. Yeah, that's been interesting. I just actually learned this recently and I'm like, why didn't I know this 50 videos ago?
Pardon me. In terms of your workshops, let's talk a little bit about how a workshop or a tour with Sarah Lyndsay, what does that look like? What does a typical day on a workshop with you look like?
They're intense. So again, I usually partner with people. I've been very fortunate. I've had a couple of fellows that I've worked with who already had something built up, and then I'm lucky enough to be brought on to co-lead it. And I also now work with Luminar. That software, they do what's called Luminar Adventures now, but last year they started up a camp and they bring on 40. It's really great. And they brought me on as one of the masters, and that was pretty cool. So they approached me about that. But these tours so I think everybody has a definition of what a tour and a workshop is. But when we run something, we consider a tour. Like a workshop is very educational based. There'll be a lot of classroom time and you're learning something. And then like the type of photo tours we do, especially me and this fella, his name's Josh Cripps. Me and him have done quite a few together. It's more of a trip. It's an experience for the client. It's a trip. We are teaching them photography out in the field, but the focus is taking them to the locations. And then we also add in extras because these clients pay a lot of money for these tours. That's the market we're in. Like we add in like a wine tour or really nice restaurants and just give them a whole experience because that's what they want. And they're typically older, retired with a photography hobby, and they just want to make new friends and come learn photography, but also enjoy whatever country we're in at the same time. But they're very draining. Like for all of us, those tour leaders and the participants at the end, we're just like, we're dead, but we did it. We all did it. So it's pretty go. Those sunrises and sunsets. It's always revolved around those.
Absolutely. How do you maintain your creative vision and your artistic integrity and balance that with the commercial or client demands in your photography? Because what you might like photographing might not be what sells. And whether that's an NFT or whether it's a print or whatever medium it's going to be. And how do you balance what you like to do versus what actually is commercially successful?
That's a great question. I think about this a lot. So if I'm doing commercial work, which I don't do as much commercial work as like I used to, because I'm very focused on building the yellow dress brand. And when I'm doing the yellow dress stuff, it is my 100% creative vision. But I've also basically become the brand. Like it's not just the yellow dress that's a brand, like Sarah is the brand. So what goes, whatever I create goes. And how I like get around monetizing on that is just understanding the markets that I would fit in. So I fit in the art market, and in terms of let's just say NFTs or prints, when I have financial goals with those as well, like what I want to be selling my work at. So it's really just actually understanding for me, I create whatever I want to create. And a lot of the people that might buy my work will say in the NFT world, maybe they don't really care about it. That doesn't bother me whatsoever. It's more about the transactional value that's taking place. So they're actually more buying into you than actually buying your artwork. And in terms of the commercial work, like if I was doing commercial work for people, like I just worked with a camper van company in Scotland, and there was obviously expectations on both sides, and I fulfilled the expectations that they had. But I also obviously was able to create what I wanted to. But they were really great, like with the creative freedom. Like I made them a YouTube video and they didn't care what I put in it. They loved watching me go out and create the yellow dress stuff how I saw it. So I don't actually really struggle with this. But if I was doing commercial work for like hotels or like photographing hotels, or I'm traveling or anything like that, I know what to give them. And it doesn't bother me at all to photograph that. It's easy.
A little bit different when there's a client with a brief, because if you don't fit the brief, they're not going to hire you again. And
that stuff doesn't end up on social media or anything. Like I already know how to do it. I know the skill. Just go out and photograph it, dump it in a gallery, and then they use it. Yeah. So I don't struggle with that. I know a lot of people will say if they're doing photography for a living, then they'll lose their love for it. But I don't feel that at all, because I'm realistic. I'm like, if you want to pay the bills, you might have to go and photograph a few hotels. And it's an ego thing. But I'm also, and then while I'm doing stuff that I do want to pay the bills, but the main thing I want to pay the bills is the yellow dress. That has to be based on my vision. Because again, I'm the brand.
Mm-hmm. A lot of people have the really big question, how do you price your work? And when I say that, it's not about giving me the number or whatever. It's about, do you have a formula that you use, or do you just think of a number?
I have a formula now, but I didn't before. But that comes as you learn business. Sure. I really don't believe, there's so many little different genres that this could apply to, but let's just take NFTs, for example. It's very similar to selling prints. So this would apply to if you had a gallery and you were trying to sell prints. You're likely not going to have a gallery, though, right away. You're going to have to build up a name. So I really think a photographer can shoot themselves in the foot if let's say they pick up a camera in their first year, they go out and create some work, and then they want to sell it. There's no way you will be able to be selling for what the people who are very seasoned and are already selling at like this high price. It's just not going to happen. You have no value. You have no value to add to the world. No, it's not just about pretty pictures. You got to build up to that. So definitely starting off at a lower price point. And for those people, so let's say in the NFT world, if you're new to it and you are starting off at a lower price point, and let's just say you become very successful and a lot of people are putting their trust into you to become successful. Those people that supported you early on are only winning in the end. They got in at the Sarah Lyndsay early price point.
They picked up a bargain.
They picked up a bargain before your value exploded. So
that's right.
I think the formula is very gradual when you start out, and to be realistic, there's just no way, let's use an example. Photographer Will Patino, very successful landscape photographer. If I started photography just this year, landscape photography, I can't go and ask for the prices that he's asking. You've got to build it up, and that's just business. That's just life, and there's nothing wrong with that.
No, that's right. I think a lot of people, particularly my opinion of what I've seen in the NFT market in particular, a lot of people are a bit naive, I think, about the parallels that are in that market with the traditional art market.
Yeah,
because
it's cool.
Everyone talks up it being Web3 and the artist being in control and all the rest of that sort of thing. But the gatekeepers are still there on both markets. And those elements that you were just talking about is a beginner or somebody that's not known, doesn't have a name in the market, is not going to be able to sell their work for the same price as somebody that's blown up and has got that name.
Yep. And it's all, of course, I think you're bang on about people being quite naive. But I also think the NFT space, when it started, since it was new and it was exciting and there was hype,
And
it filled people's head with
it was a gold
dreams.
rush, and people get excited when there's a gold rush.
Yeah, exactly. But then it also helps weed out the people that don't have the drive or the passion to stick with it. And it's still very much growing, but it is, on my last tour, I was working with a lady that works for Google, and we were talking about the NFT world. And she said right now it's just extreme niche. So we're still very early on in the NFT art world, and there are tons of, it's fascinating. It is a fascinating world. There are tons of traditional art collectors that are like, we believe this is the future. So they're now collecting into that. And we're still in the early years. We're still considered the pioneers of it and building it up.
The traditional big names like Sotheby's and Christie's and
Sotheby's and Christie's. I think you got to use your common sense as well. It's so hard to, you got to let trust build up, especially with other photographers. Like other photographers are always telling each other what to do. So you really got to use your gut and take your time to understand the motive of that photographer. And if what they're saying feels wrong, it likely is wrong and not right for you.
Yeah.
So that's really important, is building up trust. And it's, Sotheby's and Christie's. And if you can open up your mind and just see like what the traditional art world, how they are incorporating this NFT world, like why would they be doing that if they don't believe it has a future?
Exactly. They might have smelled the gold and said, okay, well, there's a short-term gain to be made, and we'll dip in, and if it all falls over, no big deal. But I agree with you. I think they've looked at it and said there's probably a future here, and it's probably not going to go away too quickly. It might be a bit rocky in the early days, but it's,
of course,
because
it mirrors crypto. It does. Yeah. It's tied with crypto.
I don't think it's helped with some of the PFP and some of the gamification projects which fall over, get rugged, and all those sorts of things where people are investment for me, and it's no different to Wall Street or the ASX.
Yeah, exactly. That art is the exact same thing.
It's just a fancy form of betting.
Yep, exactly. And like people are betting on the artist's value going up. And I think where people are naive as well is that you also have to understand human psychology. So with business, I think it's really important to learn that there will be collectors that we call them collectors. They will often talk a lot about, oh, we're here for the art. We just love the art. And it's, if you know how humans operate, any sort of relationship, even whether it's like a friendship, a romantic partnership, or there's money involved, there always needs to be transactional value. Someone is gaining something from someone. Absolutely. And to think that is not how the world works is very naive. So some of these collectors might pump up their name or pump up artists in the NFT space, but they're doing it for a reason. It's all about trust and understanding people's motives.
They want to make, they've invested early, and they want to make a profit at the end of the day.
Yes. There are collectors, though. They're very few and far between. I have one great collector. I just know I could always go to him, and because his heart is so good. But I took time to learn, like, for us to get to know each other. And he is so, the knowledge that he shares with everybody, he's such a successful man, is that of course, I'm here to make money, but he is passionate about photography. He loves it. So he gets great joy out of collecting, but he's smart. So he'll pass on something that he doesn't think is like worthy of his time. But that man, I believe in, because of how I grew up, I didn't really have a proper upbringing. I've had people come into my life through my photography journey that have been mentors and have planted like that seed of my mind and have helped me actually grow and learn all this stuff.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about where you've shot, where you like to shoot. What locations are still on your bucket list? You've been to many of the big ones, but is there anywhere that you just haven't been that is still there, burning away, going, I've got to go there, I've got to go there?
Yeah, probably every country in the world. Right now,
that's my list, but
that's my dream. Of course, I'm realistic that it won't happen for
pre-COVID. I was actually planning to do the Silk Road because it's You don't see a lot of people do that because it's hard. It's not easy to actually do that, and you don't see a lot of photography from it. And that was one of the reasons why I was planning to do it. But then COVID hit, and it was
well, just pushed
starting
it
off
back.
the journey in China. That's probably not a great idea.
Yeah, you just got to push it back a little bit. There's a ton of places. So right now, I'm obviously really in love with Europe, and like I did Australia, I've done New Zealand, I've done North America. So my focus right now is on the European countries, and I just love, oh my gosh, I just love it here so much. I love the old charming history, the buildings. So that's my focus right now, is knocking off some countries around Europe. I really want to go to Rome. Really want to go to Rome. Not to go see all those. I will. I love seeing the really popular spots because they're popular for a reason. They are beautiful, but I'd love to find some old streets and just create like a little yellow dress series of like street photography, but old and charming. And another project that I want to undertake, but this would be a huge project, and I'm just trying to even think of how I could begin this, is I would really love to, because of what the yellow dress represents, and I hope to help as best as I can, like change anything in the world for the better. That's pretty important to me. So I would love to travel to different countries and photograph other women in the yellow dress and tell their story.
Cool.
Yeah, I think that would be pretty cool. I would love that. It would be very sad, though. I can already tell. I know I'd see some sad things.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, that would be hard.
Yeah. What, I guess, is the furthest you've had to travel for a shot that you've deliberately said, I'm going to go there for photography as my main purpose?
There's always other motives of why I go to all the countries as well, because I love to like just travel and see friends. The furthest I've ever gone just for the shot, I don't know. That's a hard question for me to answer because I'm so easygoing. And if I know I'm going to a country, I'm like, okay, I get obsessed with it and then I go and create. But the furthest I have gone from my home in Canada is definitely Australia.
Okay.
That is quite the journey over there.
Yeah, it's a bit of a hike across the Pacific. I've done it several times.
Yes.
Both for work and also for pleasure. But
last year near the end of the year, I traveled back and forth to Australia 6 times because that's where I had a partner that lived over there. So it's going back to see him. So I created a lot of stuff in Australia, which was really fun. And New Zealand, obviously.
Yeah, fantastic.
I haven't done any of the Asian countries yet. So that'll probably be next after Europe.
Cool. Is there anywhere you've been that you say, I'd love to retire there?
Yes.
I know it's way too early for you, but
no,
probably
everywhere, all of them. I've always, since I was a little girl, I always thought I would live in Europe. I love it here so much. I just love the culture and like of the different I love London. So this is definitely a place but I guess it depends what happens with the rest of my life. Like I'm just so open to whatever comes into my life comes into my life. If I end up living in Croatia, I end up living in Croatia.
Great.
But I love Canada too. So like that's my home. And I'm born and raised in the forests of Canada. So I always want to have something there.
I think I'd be pretty happy retiring in Banff. I've been there a couple of times, and that'd be a good spot to retire, I reckon.
Yes, I want to buy it. I actually live in Canmore, but I just say Banff because it's easier for people to understand. But I do have a goal. I have a goal of owning like a condo or something in Canmore, but we are way far from that goal. Yeah.
So what's your most memorable experience in photography?
Wow. Probably when the yellow dress started. And the first country that the yellow dress went to was New Zealand. So that trip, I did a 2-week trip in New Zealand. It was not based on photography, though. It was based on photography, but there was nothing that like, I wasn't working for clients. I was just creating fully for myself, and I was with the right person. And we had the most beautiful trip of probably my life. And it really kickstarted my love for travel and taking the yellow dress places. So I'd say that was the most memorable moment for me in photography.
Fantastic. What about horror stories? Everyone has a trip or an event that has changed their life? Have you had any?
Yeah, I've had some horror stories. And again, like my photography journey mirrors my personal life journey so closely. So I can't ever really separate the two. But I think I had a nightmare story in Australia and I had a nightmare story in Mexico. Like I went to meet up with a friend in Mexico and that was going to be on my list of creating as well. So I love to take the yellow dress to all the different countries, and just the person that I was with was just he just wasn't kind. And I actually ended up one night, I was only there for 3 days. And on the last night of my third night, I just looked at him. I'm like, I'm booking a plane ticket. I'm going.
Wow.
So and I didn't end up creating any content there. I didn't do anything, no yellow dress image. And I came back home to Canada and made a kind of a little bit of a YouTube video based around the reality of travel and photography. And it doesn't always work out. It wasn't a horror story, but it was just a pain in the butt.
What have you learned about the world through photography?
Oh man, that is beautiful. Like the world is gorgeous, and so that I hold very near and dear to my heart. Like the world is a beautiful place to photograph. But I've actually learned also the opposite about humans, that the world is actually quite ugly. And that's why the yellow dress has the purpose it does, is because it just breaks my heart. Like the way people treat each other, and it's everywhere. It's all over the world, especially in like the vast difference of North America to other places that don't have anything, and like just seeing how children live. And so photography's opened me up to that. Again, it goes along with my personal development journey of just trying to be a much better person to the world. But I think the world is really ugly. It's beautiful and it looks like, but the heart of the world is selfish. And
I think people are the problem personally, but
people, they're just the world looks beautiful and the people are ugly. And I don't want to be that. And I know how I grew up and I know how it affected my life and just made living quite difficult. So I refuse to add to that. I want to have the opposite effect. So that's the goal with the yellow dress, is hopefully to help inspire or change anything that I can.
Yeah, fair enough. Do you prefer shooting alone or with other people?
It really depends on what I'm focused on. If I need to work and create, especially for YouTube, I have like certain people that I can be around that come out with me. It's usually other YouTubers, because we just respect each other's space. We both go out, and if we need to help each other, we help each other. But if other people want to come shoot with me, that is totally fine. But if I'm doing anything for like YouTube, I need to be on my own.
Do you get your shot, take it home, get it into the computer, start editing straight away, or are you the type that leaves it for a little while and lets it gestate? Or
I'm a bit of both. If I'm really excited about it, and especially if it's for YouTube, I'll have to get to it right away. But it's actually mostly my landscape work that sits. I was just doing a tour in New Zealand and I have so much to edit from that still. Yeah, I'll definitely let things sit, but I don't create as much as I used to, which is interesting because I shoot now with more intention and story planning. And it's just I'm not like the spray and pray shooter anymore. So I don't have a huge backlog of images, but yeah, if it's important and it needs to go on YouTube the next week, then I get to it right away.
Yep.
And if I'm excited about it, I'm like, yes, I need to edit this.
Right into it.
Yeah.
What does processing look like for you? Is it you said you started out with Photoshop. I'm just interested. I don't want all the secret sauce or anything like that, but are you spending a minimal amount of time per image, or anything up to an hour or 2 hours, or sometimes days? I know some people
not days.
Take a long time to edit.
No, I can't spend days on them. I used to edit a lot more than what I do now because I started out that way. So I really loved the process of Photoshop and putting things together. But now I think wedding photography actually shifted that a lot for me, because you have to edit so much at once that you become quite quick. And I'm a big believer getting it right in the camera as well.
You get your workflow nailed and
Yes. So I'm a pretty simple editor now, actually. Like I'm very focused on getting it right in camera, but there are still some that I do need to spend quite a bit of time with, because I know I can transform them into something that's great if I spend the time doing it. But I put out an editing tutorial recently, and it was based on my quick workflow of you can create drama in a matter of 20 minutes. And it's very simple. There's no luminosity masking, nothing like that. It's just really simple techniques that I built up over time so that I can quickly get out images.
Yeah, fantastic. You mentioned that you've received a lot of support and help from some other photographers and YouTubers, and you've mentioned a couple like Nigel and Adam. How important do you see that collaborative approach and that community building and fostering younger artists? How important do you see that to being, I guess, a player in the industry?
So important. I think it's actually one of the most important things. And my last video I put out was like, if I could start photography from zero, this is what I would do. And there was 3 key points that I touched on, and one of them was engaging and building a community. Yep. So when you're starting out, like, it's just so important in the early stages to be getting involved with places, because that will help you grow. And I didn't do this to start with. Like, I used to be very private and quiet and just loved creating for myself. So now I'm playing, like the last few years, playing a lot of catch up of building up a little community. But I think it's really important. Building a community will translate into business.
Absolutely.
So it's so important. But even the fact that I will see a lot of people. Okay, so in my position now, like when Nigel reached out to me, this was many years ago, and he basically said, get on YouTube, give me the push. There was no reason he had to do that. And he just did it because he saw it in me. So I can see myself doing that. So, and I'm like, see my friends who are just like baby photographers, this is just a hobby for them. If I see something that they do on social media that really jumps out at me, I am all over them. Like, you don't understand. I see your potential. I see it in you. Keep going with this, keep going. So, because I feel the passion for them in my heart, and I just want to make me go. And I know how important encouragement is.
Absolutely.
Like, a lot of people don't have encouragement, and especially when they're starting in the early on stages, they don't have it. So I try very hard to be that voice for people.
That's one of the reasons why I started this. There's many reasons why I started this podcast, was that view of looking at people in the industry, or even if they're not in the industry, they're not selling or whatever. And one of the things that I'm really trying to do with this is be fairly diverse in my coverage. I've got people like yourself that have got quite strong social media followings. And as I said at the beginning, people should know your name. But there's also people that have got like 100 followers that I've had on. Yeah. And the thing is, I've recognised, as you said, in their work, there's something there, and they need that. Well, they may not need that push. They may have the drive themselves. But for me, I think if I can give them a leg up or I can give them a push along, then it's certainly going to help.
Yeah, I agree. But you're also helping the not younger, but baby photographers, I guess we'll call them. You're also helping them by bringing on the big people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that knowledge that you guys are adding is just so valuable to the people who want to learn and grow. Totally. So it's incredible doing that.
Yeah, that you can get from somebody with a great deal of experience that's been in the game for a long time is absolutely vital, I think, to help people grow their own careers, if it's the career they're looking for.
Yes.
Also, be helpful if it's just a hobby.
Yeah, absolutely. Because in some way, no matter when you're sharing your art to the world, you want some sort of recognition. We all do.
Absolutely.
Like it's whether that's
that endorphin hit when somebody says, "Hey, great shot."
Yeah. Whether it's just to monetize or to just be recognized, we all want it. So the knowledge that we all share can be helpful for everything.
Definitely. What do you see as the biggest challenge facing photographers right now?
Oh, this is a good one. Honestly, there's a couple of things: lack of business knowledge and not understanding, if they want to make money off of it, not understanding what it truly takes to make it as a business. And social media. I think social media is one of the biggest challenges because it's such a pain in the butt. We still need like an outlet.
It's a love-hate thing, isn't it?
It's a love-hate. We still need an outlet to share our work and get recognized and grow and be able to do it as a living. But like the rate that the world is changing into short form video is very obvious, and So we have to adapt, and you
Mm.
don't have to change. Like, you don't have to become like, oh, the next dancer on TikTok, but you need to figure out how to use these platforms as a new business card.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's challenging for me because I'm stubborn, and I do short form video, but I'm not as dedicated to it as, say, like the long form YouTube content.
Yeah, I'm very much the same. I much prefer these longer conversations and the podcast form. Yet another reason why I started was I was listening to some of the other landscape photography like Matt Payne and Nick Page and those guys, and they triggered off that inspiration to say, oh, I reckon I could do that.
Yeah. So I think you're actually in a smart position because, especially with YouTube, podcasts are on the rise with YouTube.
Very much.
Yeah.
I noticed the other week they've actually now created a new playlist sort of element, which is basically a podcast. So you can actually classify a playlist now as a podcast, or create a completely new playlist as a podcast.
Podcasts are taking over. Yep, that's good. That's good.
What do you see the future of photography being?
We're definitely going to be influenced by, I guess, AI. So
definitely,
that's quite I guess we're gonna have to see what's gonna happen. But no matter what changes and like how much AI takes over, I do think that photography will still always have its niche, and there will always be people that love it and support it. And just like film, like when we change from film to digital, film is still around. There's still people that are into film. It just might become even more extreme, like extreme niche. Yeah. That's where I see the future.
I don't see people that love the experience of getting out into the field and doing landscape photography. I see definite threats for people doing commercial photography, less so weddings, because that's an event if you're not there. So I think some of those may actually gain a little bit of value.
Yeah.
But for the modeling industry and for things like product photography, I can definitely see
the threat. Yes.
Marketers just typing away going, okay, this can of whatever it is, the soft drink is exactly that way. I want a few more dew bubbles on it. Thank you very much. And they'll get what they want.
Yep. People are soon going to be selling prompts rather than tutorials.
Exactly.
Yeah. It'll be I know it's going to be.
It'll open up new markets. It'll close down some others.
Yes. That's why I think it's so important, but it'll never take away how humans emotionally connect with each other. So that's why I think it's so important to, if you're comfortable with it, like in my case, I'm not afraid of video at all or talking to the camera. So this is my chance to connect with people and create that like emotional connection with them. So I see video being very valuable.
Absolutely. If you weren't a photographer, what would you be?
Wow, so many things. My first choice would be a psychologist. I really am into that. And my second choice is a police officer.
Wow. Okay.
I know, but I'm too sensitive to be a police officer.
All right,
I would have such a hard time.
I'm definitely on Twitter now saying Sarah wants to be a cop.
I almost quit. It was like maybe 2018 before I got divorced. I was like, I want to be a police officer because my brother went through the same journey and he is a police officer now, but I just obviously wasn't like driven or passionate enough for it. And I really thought about it. I was like, there's no way that I could go up to car accident scenes and see dead people and see children abused. So I obviously am very passionate about what I do. So I'm sticking with it.
Yeah. I have a brother-in-law in the UK, actually, who's recently retired as a police officer. And some of the stories he's had and some of the stories he won't tell as well. But I know that he's been involved through other sources. Yeah, it's definitely not. I got to admit, it was something that I considered as a career choice when I was at school.
Yeah, but, it's an amazing career.
But, absolutely. But again, it came down to, is it something I'm passionate enough about to get into? And it turned out I was much more passionate about computing and IT than I was about being a police officer.
We all have our thing. I'm quite passionate about like psychology. I do therapy and I've been doing it for about 4 years and I just love what I learned. So if this ever did go down, that's probably I would go that way.
Yeah, fantastic. Are there any photographers that you think I should be talking to on the podcast?
Yeah, I think you should give Jenna Dixon.
I've actually already spoken to Jenna.
Oh, okay, so you did?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay, no, actually, I remember that. Oh my gosh, I should go back and listen to it. I remember when that happened. Okay, she would be my choice. There's tons. I think David was the one who recommended me. Yep. I think Timbo Slice would be a good one. There's also this other fella, actually. He recently just quit his full-time job to become a photographer. Mm-hmm. And he might be a pretty interesting person to talk to because he's just fresh into the transition, and it's just how he struggled, but he doesn't want to give up. Like his name is James Michael Andrew Photography. And then also and then also Timbo Slice. That's his.
I know Tim.
Yeah. Tim is so lovely. No, never mind. Scrap those guys. Sorry.
Okay.
I just thought of someone because he's incredible. Yeah, he's incredible. His story is incredible. Is Robert Downey in his
Intrepid Photos.
Intrepid.
Yeah,
I would do him.
I've asked him, and
what did he say?
He said no a little while ago. He wasn't in the right space, but I might hit him up again. Hit him up again. Yeah, that was a year or so ago. Yeah.
Hit him up again because he's got a story. What happened?
Hit him up in DMs and tell him to go.
I will. I'll message him and I'll be like, just do it so you can go tell your story on the podcast. Those are my recommendations.
He does have a fantastic story. I've seen his posts around that, and he's
it's heartbreaking.
Getting hung out to dry in the Caribbean.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. But those are my recommendations.
All right. I've got one more question for you, and for most of my listeners, it's the most important one that I have. Do you like pineapple on pizza?
Absolutely. I'm Canadian. We invented it.
Why is it called Hawaiian then?
I don't know. We must have been like, pineapple is very Hawaiian. Of course I do. That was my favorite pizza growing up as a kid. Hawaiian
really?
Or pineapple, ham, and cheese.
Yep.
That is a Canadian classic pizza, and it's delicious.
Fantastic. All right. Well, it's been absolutely wonderful having you on the show, Sarah. Where can people find your work?
The best place is probably my website, which is www.saralyndsayphotography.com. Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. YouTube is the most valuable for everybody. Definitely YouTube. So I'm everywhere as Sarah Lyndsay.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you very much, Sarah.
Thank you very much.
Thanks again for listening to Landscape Photography World. I hope you enjoyed the show, and keep listening because I'll be joined by some great guests in upcoming episodes. You can find my work in this podcast at grantswinburnphotography.com. I'm also on Vero, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. If you're interested in buying prints or photography gear or doing a photo workshop with me, these are also on sale on my website. I'm Grant Swinburne. Hope to see you out shooting soon.